The village was quiet, not the kind of quiet that brings peace, but the kind that presses heavy on the chest. The ground was dry, cracked open like it too remembered what had happened. The market stalls stood empty, the air thick with dust and regret. And then they appeared. Two shadows walking side by side, tall, scarred, silent, Obina and Chuka. No one said a word. No one dared. The same people who once called them cursed now bowed their heads, unable to meet their eyes. The same elders who once said they should have been drowned at birth now trembled in silence, because Obina and Chuka had returned, not as boys, not as sons, but as men shaped by pain and trained by rejection. Years ago, the village tossed them aside. Their own mother feared them. Their father died defending their name. But now the wind had changed, and the ground beneath the village would remember their footsteps, because the twins no one wanted had come home. And this time, they weren't asking for permission. Before we go deeper into this gripping tale, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. And if you love deep stories of revenge, pain, and truth, subscribe now. Obina and Chuka were born during Harmattan. The sky was gray and cracked, the wind so dry it scraped the skin. Their cries shook the walls of the midwife's hut before they even took their first breaths. When the midwife finally laid eyes on them, she dropped the cloth in her hand. Newborns weren't supposed to look like that. Long-limbed, with hands large enough to grip her wrist, and eyes that didn't blink. She refused to cut the cords. She called for the priest. The priest came with salt and prayers. He looked once and said, "These are Ogbanje, spirits sent to test us." But another elder, his voice heavy with fear and awe, whispered, "No, these are warriors, sent too early." Either way, no one dared to name them. Not until 3 days passed. Their father, Obika, stood tall with his hunting spear, staring at the sons his wife barely touched. He named them himself, Obina, Chuka. "They are mine," he said. "They will not be hidden." But even Obika, strong and proud, built a wall around the back of his compound, not to keep the boys safe, but to shield them from the village. Their mother, Neka, rarely held them. She said their bodies were too warm, too heavy. "Something is not right," she whispered more than once. And in the village, no one argued. The other children avoided their home. At festivals, the twins were left out of the circle. When they tried to join, drums stopped playing. Songs paused mid-verse. At age 3, Obina crushed a chicken's neck. He thought he was playing. At age 5, Chuka snapped a clay pot in half because he was hungry. The villagers said no child should have strength like that. No laughter, no softness. The whispers returned. They should have never been allowed to live. No peace will come with them here. So Obika did the only thing he knew. He trained them. Every morning before the first roosters crow, he led them into the forest. "If they won't accept you," he said, "then become something they cannot defeat." He taught them how to move without being heard, how to track with their noses, how to wrestle barehanded. By 7, they could carry a goat on their shoulders. By 10, they were hunting wild pigs. But even then, no one came near. They ate alone, played alone, slept side by side like soldiers, back to back, in a world that feared them. And maybe that's what made everything else inevitable. Because when a place keeps reminding you that you don't belong, eventually you stop trying to belong. But what no one in that village saw coming was the price they would all pay for turning their backs. By the time Obina and Chuka turned 6, the rules around them had changed. They weren't allowed outside after sunset, not because it was dangerous, but because they were considered the danger. The neighbors said their shadows were too long, their eyes too bright. Even the old women who used to greet children with cola and stories crossed the road when the twins walked by. And the children? They didn't run to play. They ran from them, screaming, stumbling through the dust, as if Obina and Chuka were creatures instead of boys. At home, things weren't softer. Their father, Obika, once so proud, began to change. He watched his sons with suspicion now, watched them lift clay pots with ease, carry full water basins on their heads without spilling a drop. "Don't lift that," he barked once when Chuka helped carry a bundle of firewood. "You are not a man yet." But when Chuka didn't drop it fast enough, Obika's belt came down hard, over and over. "You will not shame me with your strangeness," he said. "You will learn your place." Obina took the beatings in silence. Chuka clenched his jaw. But the worst pain didn't come from Obika's hands. It came from the one person they still believed might love them. Neka. Mama. One night the wind was loud and the lanterns flickered in the hut. Neka told them to sit in front of the fire. She didn't speak for a long time. Then, without warning, she grabbed their hands one after the other and pressed them toward the flame. Not close enough to burn, but close enough to blister. They yelped, tried to pull away, but she held firm. "You were born wrong," she whispered, almost as if saying it louder would curse her more. "God made a mistake." Obina pulled his hand back first. Chuka stared at the flame, his eyes full of something deeper than fear. Not anger, not sadness, determination. That night they didn't cry, at least not together. Obina wept silently beneath the raffia mat, his back to the wall. Chuka sat beside him, fists clenched, eyes wide open in the dark, not sleeping, just watching. They thought isolation would break the boys, but it didn't. Something else did. The days grew heavier. The space between them and the rest of the world widened. People called them cursed in front of their faces now. When one goat went missing, it was their fault. When someone's baby got sick, Neka was asked what sins she had committed. No one visited their home anymore. No one shared food. No one called their names, unless it was to accuse them of something. At the village stream, the other boys pushed them aside. "Go bathe with the spirits," one boy shouted. Obina stared at the water. He wanted to say something, but Chuka stepped in front of him instead and said nothing. His silence said enough. The others backed away, not out of fear, but because deep down, they knew they'd gone too far. The twins learned to live without smiles, without comfort, without a future. But even as the world shut its doors, they didn't turn on each other. They shared everything. One cup, one mat, one promise. We survive together, or not at all. And in that bond, silent, stubborn, unbreakable, something began to grow. Not revenge, not yet. Just a knowing that one day, they would no longer need to be accepted. They would be remembered. And that would be enough. By the time Obina and Chuka turned 11, the village had made up its mind. It wasn't enough to reject them. It wasn't enough to isolate them. Now they wanted to fix them. A meeting was held in secret. Elders, mothers, even the town priest gathered beneath the mango tree behind the shrine. They whispered of strange things. The twins' strength, their silence, the way animals grew restless when the boys passed by. "They are not natural," one elder said. "Their spirits are heavy." Another added, "If we do nothing, they will bring ruin." Their conclusion, the twins must be cleansed. Obika resisted at first. "They are my sons," he said, but his voice cracked. Maybe he too had grown tired of the whispers, the shame, the way neighbors no longer greeted him at the market. And Neka? She didn't say a word. She just nodded when they told her where to take them. The twins were told they were going to pray. "Just a blessing," their mother said. "You'll be fine. You'll come back stronger." She wouldn't meet their eyes. They left at dawn, tied at the wrist with a red rope. No one explained why. The man guiding them said nothing until they reached the edge of the forest. That's when Obina began to feel something in his chest, a heaviness he couldn't name. Chuka, always quieter, looked at the trees and whispered, "Mama's not coming back, is she?" Obina didn't answer. He didn't know. They walked for hours. The forest thickened. The air grew damp. Finally, they reached a clearing, an old shrine built of mud and palm leaves nearly swallowed by vines. And there, waiting, was the prophet. He was an old man with white chalk across his face and no expression. "Leave them," he said. "Come back in 7 days." What followed was not prayer. It was punishment. They were stripped of their shirts, forced to sleep on wet earth, tied at the ankles with chains rusted by age. The prophet said they needed to be emptied before they could be filled. "You carry spirits that do not belong," he muttered. So he starved them, beat them, poured cold water over them in the middle of the night. He burned herbs that made them choke. One morning he held a knife and said, "If you die, it means the spirit has left." Chuka collapsed on the 5th day. His lips cracked, his eyes unfocused. He stopped responding to Obina's voice. Just laid there, breathing like a thread about to snap. And that was the moment something changed. Obina stood up. No one saw him coming. No one expected him to break the chain. But he did. He pulled the rusted metal against the edge of the shrine until it snapped. His hands bled. His arms shook. But he didn't stop. He lifted Chuka onto his back, barefoot, bruised and burning with something stronger than pain, and began walking. 3 miles, through forest, through thorns, through memory. He didn't cry. He didn't shout. He just walked. When they reached the village at dusk, the world went silent. The people stared, not because they were ashamed, but because they were afraid. The boy they tried to cast out had returned, carrying his brother like a warrior returning from battle. That day, the villagers feared them even more. But fear is not the same as respect, and what came next was betrayal beyond family. Obina and Chuka were 13 when it happened. It was early morning. The sky hadn't turned blue yet. Their mother woke them with a whisper. No warmth, no explanation. "Get dressed." That was all she said. Their father was waiting by the road, leaning on his walking stick, his face hidden in the collar of his wrapper. Obina knew something was wrong. Chuka felt it too, but they followed, as they always did. There was a man waiting at the edge of the village, tall, clean-shaven, dressed too finely for someone coming that early. A truck sat behind him, engine humming, filled with sacks of cocoa, ropes, and rusted tools. The man didn't smile. He didn't ask their names. He just looked them up and down, then nodded. Their father pulled out a piece of paper. Didn't read it, just handed it over. The man responded by whistling once, and from behind the truck came 2 goats, fat, clean, and tied with ropes. That was the trade, 2 sons for 2 goats. Obina stared at the animals, confused. Chuka reached for his brother's hand. Their mother didn't look back. Their father simply said, "You are old enough now. Make yourselves useful somewhere else." No goodbye. No blessing. Just the sound of the truck door slamming shut. The farm was 3 towns away, hidden deep behind rows of cocoa trees, surrounded by rusted barbed wire and silence. The man, people called him Baba Cola, spoke only when he wanted more work done. "Clear that patch. Tie that bundle. Move faster." Their days began before the sun rose and didn't end until it was gone. 16 hours, no breaks, no friends, no kindness. They slept on the floor of a wooden shack beside the drying barn, ate once a day, if there was food, drank from a cracked bucket of rainwater. When Obina once asked for more food for his brother, he was whipped with the belt buckle until his back bled. Chuka tried to stand in front of him the next time, so they whipped them both. But through it all, they never let go of each other. They stopped counting the days. Time didn't matter anymore. Only survival. Only the promise they whispered to each other in the dark. "We'll come back one day, stronger." They trained in silence, pushing logs, lifting stones, running when no one was watching, When one was weak, the other carried him. When one was beaten, the other took half the blame. And the bond that had always made them outcasts became their strength. For 7 years, no one heard their names again. No letters, no news, no prayers. Just silence. But silence doesn't mean something is gone. Sometimes it means something is coming. They were 20 when they ran. It happened during the Harmattan. The wind was thick with dust and the farm dogs barked all night. Baba Kola had gone into town, leaving the gates unlocked for the first time in years. The twins didn't speak. They didn't plan. They just looked at each other and ran. No bags, no water, no map. Just feet pounding through bush paths until the trees thinned and the air smelled like diesel. They ran until their legs gave out. Then they walked. Then they crawled. Then they stood again. 3 days later, they reached a town. Strange faces. No one knew them, and that was a blessing. They slept beneath wooden stalls and washed their faces in gutters. But luck, or fate, has a strange way of listening to the patient. A retired fighter named Alhaji Musa spotted them when they stopped a street thief from snatching a woman's bag. He didn't thank them. He just watched how they moved. "You boys have stone in your bones," he said. "You want work?" At first it was night watch duty, then escorting travelers across dangerous roads. Word spread. The silent twins with arms like tree trunks. They spoke little, worked hard, and never smiled. The street called them the Shadows in Twos. Alhaji trained them in private, taught them how to move with purpose. Not just brawn, but precision. How to listen before striking. How to let people underestimate you. Eventually their reputation crossed the wrong desk and the right one. An underground fighting circle invited them. It was illegal, brutal, unforgiving. But the money was good, and the ring was honest in a way the world had never been to them. You fight, you win, you earn. They entered under fake names, but the headlines didn't care. Twin Titans win again. The Brothers of Iron remain undefeated. Silent, ruthless, unstoppable. They grew massive. Shoulders like steel, eyes like granite. But what never changed was their silence. Because no matter how loud the cheers got, they never forgot where they came from. They never forgot the mango tree behind their old house, where they cried at night. Where Chuka once bled from his lip after being blamed for stealing yam he never touched. Where Obinna sat alone after being told his laughter scared the chickens. They never forgot the betrayal. And just when they thought they'd buried that part of their past for good, something happened in the village. Something that called them home. It started as whispers. A band of armed raiders had been moving from village to village, burning homes, stealing livestock, kidnapping daughters, and leaving silence behind them. When they finally reached Ameka, the twins' forgotten village, they didn't stop to ask questions. They didn't threaten. They took. The first night, 3 homes were torched. The second, 2 girls went missing. By the third, even the strongest men of the village had stopped patrolling. They locked themselves indoors, clutching rusted machetes they hadn't sharpened in years. The people panicked. The elders called a meeting, but it was filled with silence. The once proud hunters were now too old, too weak, too afraid. Their spears had become decoration. Their knees couldn't carry them far. There were no warriors left. No one willing to fight. No one, until someone remembered. Obika, now aged and limping from a stroke, sat beneath the mango tree and said the names he had tried to forget. Obinna, Chuka. Neka, thinner now, her eyes sunken with time and regret, whispered through cracked lips, "Do you think they would come back?" A message was sent. Desperate. Simple. "Your people are dying. We have no one left." They didn't know if the twins would respond. They didn't know if they were even alive. But the village had no more pride to protect. 3 days later, a storm of dust rose on the village road. The sun was high, but the air had gone still. Chickens froze. Children stood barefoot, staring at the 2 shadows approaching slowly from the distance. Broad shoulders, scars across their arms, eyes like stone. No horses, no weapons. Just two men walking with the silence of something final. Obina and Chuka had returned. They didn't speak when they reached the town square. Didn't ask who remembered them. Didn't wait to be welcomed. They simply stood, tall, massive, unmoved, while the villagers stared in disbelief. The children whispered. The elders gasped. Some women covered their mouths in shame. One boy tugged his mother's wrapper and asked, "Are those the monsters?" No one answered, because the monsters had returned. But this time, they were needed. And for the first time in their lives, no one dared to look away. The first night, the bandits returned like they always did. Loud, fast, certain no one would resist. They came with cutlasses, petrol, and laughter. What they didn't expect were two men waiting at the village gate. Silent, shirtless, still as stone. Obina moved first, swift, brutal. His fist shattered the jaw of the first attacker before the man could even raise his weapon. Chuka followed. He didn't scream, he didn't boast. He just fought, with purpose, with memory, with every ounce of pain they had swallowed as boys. By sunrise, 12 bandits lay on the ground, some broken, some bloodied, all defeated. The village didn't sleep that night, not out of fear, but because they were watching the very ones they once rejected become the only shield between them and death. By morning, the twins had already begun helping rebuild the burnt huts. They didn't wait for thanks. They didn't ask for food. They just worked, carrying wood on their backs, lifting stones, clearing rubble. When someone offered them a room to sleep in, Chuka only shook his head and said, "We're used to the floor." It was on the third night that their father, Obika, appeared again. His cane trembled in his grip. His voice was weaker than they remembered. He didn't speak right away, just stood, looking at them as if trying to recognize something he'd lost long ago. Then, slowly, he knelt, his knees scraping the earth. It shocked the entire square. "I failed you," he whispered. Obina didn't flinch. He didn't step forward, but he spoke. "We never needed your love," he said, "just your eyes." The village held its breath. The mango tree swayed quietly behind them like it too was listening. Later that week, after the last fire was put out and the village began to breathe again, a loud cry was heard from the far end of the market. A child had been trapped under a fallen roof, left behind in the panic. No one could reach her. The wooden beams were too heavy, the walls too unstable. Then, through the smoke, Obina and Chuka appeared. Without hesitation, they moved through the wreckage. Obina lifted the beam while Chuka crawled beneath, pulling the girl out by her arms. Her leg was bleeding, but she was alive. The mother collapsed in tears, wrapping both twins in her arms. No one had ever touched them like that. No fear, no hesitation, just raw, grateful love. And in that moment, something shifted. The people who had once feared them now wept for them. The walls that had kept them outside began to crack. But as the village began to heal and the stories of their return spread from market to market, one more truth had yet to come out, something even they didn't expect. It was a quiet afternoon when the messenger arrived, barefoot, dust on his forehead. He didn't say much, just stood in front of Obina and Chuka, eyes low, voice thin. "It's your mother. She's not well. She's asking for you." The message was simple, but the weight it carried was not. They didn't rush, they didn't speak. They only looked at each other for a long moment and nodded once. The journey back to the old compound felt both distant and familiar. The walls still leaned the same way. The mango tree still swayed gently near the entrance, only now its fruit had fallen. Inside, the air was heavy. Their mother lay on a mat, barely skin over bones. Her scarf was wet with sweat, and her breath came in shallow gasps. When she saw them, her eyes filled, not with fear, not with pride, but with something between shame and surrender. She struggled to sit up, They moved closer. "I was afraid," she said, voice breaking. "Afraid you'd grow. Stronger than us. And you did. You did." Tears rolled down her cheeks. "I'm sorry." Silence. Obina stood still. Chuka blinked rapidly, fists clenched by his side. Forgiveness wasn't spoken. It couldn't be. But neither of them left. They stayed. Through the night, they sat beside her, one on each side. She faded slowly, painfully. No chants, no wailing, just breath, and time, and silence. And when her final breath came, she was not alone. She died holding their hands. Hands she once tried to burn. Hands that no longer needed her approval. Hands that had carried pain, and now carried peace. But even then, neither twin cried, because they had learned long ago some tears were meant to stay buried. 2 years passed, and the story of Obina and Chuka became more than a memory whispered under mango trees. It became a lesson, not just for Amaika, but for every village that had ever turned its back on its own. They never sought praise, never accepted money, never spoke of the beatings, the exile, or the betrayal. But what they did next spoke louder than anything they could have said. They took the land their father once hunted on and built something new, a center. Not made of marble or glass, but of stone and red clay, a place for boys and girls who had been told they were too loud, too strange, too strong. A home for the rejected, the misnamed, the misunderstood. They called it Ijoma House. A good journey. Inside, children laugh now. They train, they learn, they grow. And Obina and Chuka, they walk among them, teaching not just how to stand tall, but how to carry pain without becoming it. They teach them how to fight, not with fists, but with forgiveness. Because this was never just a story about revenge, it was always a story about strength, and what happens when strength is feared rather than nurtured. Before we end, tell us in the comments, how did this story make you feel? What would you have done if you were Obina or Chuka? And if you're still watching, let us know where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming stories. What would you have done if you were Obina or Chuka? Would you forgive the very people who tried to erase you? Would you hold their hands as they died, after everything? Or would you walk away and never look back? Tell us in the comments. We genuinely want to know what you would have done. And if this story moved something in you, if it made you feel seen or angry or hopeful, tap the like button. It helps more people find stories like this. And don't forget, subscribe for more true human stories every single week.